We've been discussing how Republican criticism of the Mueller investigation has been ramping up. Well, now there's new information, a report that suggests some of the special counsel's most vocal GOP critics have been in direct contact with the White House. 3 Republicans, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, and Ron DeSantis. They've openly criticized the Mueller investigation. All of them have had contact with the White House or President Trump. Here's Congressman Jordan.
Have you had conversations with the White House, not about the questions you ask, but about the Mueller investigation in general?
Well, I've talked with the White House about all kinds of things. We've had talks with the White House about tax policy. We have talks about welfare policy. We've had talks about Obamacare. Of course, we've had talks with the White House.
So joining me now is Natasha Bertrand, political correspondent for Business Insider, who has been reporting on all of this. Now, you just heard it from Representative Jordan himself. He says he's had routine contact with the White House. Now, what do you see? Do you see this as part of a new strategy to undermine the Russia probe? Does this create a potential tampering problem?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be a new strategy. I mean, the president has been trying to undermine Mueller via intermediaries for months now. We saw that he was pressuring members of Congress over the summer to put an end to the investigation, to come out and publicly exonerate him, say that he had done nothing wrong. So this is not something that would be new for him. If he were talking to Jim Jordan, if he were talking to DeSantis or Matt Gaetz, who have been among the most vocal critics of Mueller, and telling them, please do your job, question them fiercely, which is exactly what Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan did last week when they were questioning when they were questioning Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. They really grilled him about the questions about whether or not there's bias in the FBI, about whether these text messages that were sent by 2 former Mueller investigators tainted the entire investigation. So this is something that is not coming in a vacuum, and it would be very surprising if Trump was not speaking to them on a regular basis and really kind of egging them on.
Well, the question you raise in your reporting is whether these representatives in the White House coordinated their criticism of Mueller and his investigation. You say that you think it's possible. The president reached out to other members of Congress to talk about the investigation. Do you know that? Do you believe this is the case?
Absolutely. I mean, Trump has been saying for the last year that the Russia investigation is a hoax. He asked James Comey back in February if he could consider letting Mike Flynn go. He then asked him for his loyalty. He asked him several times whether he would come out and write a letter telling the public that he had done nothing wrong. So this is a pattern. This is not something that the president wants hanging over his head. And if he can find allies in Congress or even in the FBI or wherever he can get them to kind of be on his side and encourage him and have this kind of conversation with them and encourage them to, discredit the entire investigation, then he will no doubt try to do that, as we've seen in the past.
It seems like the American public doesn't really realize how serious this is. How unusual is all of this that we're talking about? Is it typical for members of the Judiciary and Oversight Committees to be discussing an open investigation with the president?
No, and the last time that we saw a president try to undermine the FBI to this extent, we all saw what happened. It was Nixon with Watergate. So this is something that, legal experts that I speak to, former FBI agents that I have regular conversations with, say is very, very bad for the president. I mean, this is not the kind of thing that he wants to be drawing attention to, kind of these fights with the FBI, because ultimately Mueller has a lot of information. He's been conducting this investigation for months, and then James Comey, of course, opened it last July. So there's a ton of evidence, a ton of things that they've been collecting over the course of the year, where if Trump continued to come out and speak and maybe, try to protect himself in the investigation and say something that could perhaps undermine or contradict anything that Mueller has found, that could be extremely damaging for him.
We talked about how the president talked to Congressman DeSantis, according to your reporting. Yet just yesterday, the president endorsed DeSantis for the Florida governor race. What do you think of that?
It's interesting. It's definitely noteworthy, especially because DeSantis introduced a provision earlier this year that would dramatically limit the scope and funding of Mueller's investigation. So this has become one of his most important subjects that he's been working on. Of course, he met with Trump aboard Air Force One a couple weeks ago before that rally in Pensacola, where Matt Gaetz, who was also there, was telling Trump that Mueller's probe has been infected with bias. Now, it's unclear whether or not DeSantis actually weighed in, but he has been privy to those conversations. So the fact now that Trump would come out and so aggressively endorse him on Twitter like that, it really raises eyebrows.